My name is David and I am 10 years old.
I'm Chloe Smith, I'm 14 years old and I have Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy.
It's a gene malfunction and what it means is that it lacks dystrophin. Dystrophin is the protein that holds the muscle together. So if you don't have enough dystrophin, the muscle just kind of breaks apart instead of staying together. So when kids are young, and you can notice the progression of him since he's been diagnosed, you can tell things that it doesn't show up as much when they're younger because the muscles are growing at such a fast rate, it almost cancels out the degeneration that's going on. But then as he gets older, you can see it gradually getting worse.
A girl having Duchenne muscular dystrophy is very, very rare. It typically only affects guys because it's an X-linked disease. So what we have found out is that girls can have skewed X inactivation. So their cells can choose to use their bad X instead of their good X.
He was, when he was 15 months old, he still wasn't walking and he wasn't really talking. And so he qualified for the early intervention program that Alabama has because he was more than 20% behind, I think it was, on the physical movement stuff. And so we went to one of the things they did was gave us a physical therapist. Well, the physical therapist looked at him trying to walk and noticed that his feet were kind of turning in, his ankles were rolling a little bit. Went to the neurologist, he did a look at him, asked him to do some things, he did the things, he said, it's funny, the wording was almost exactly the same. I don't think there's anything wrong with your son, but as a precaution, we should run this blood test. And this blood test won't tell us what's wrong, but if he fails it, it'll mean something's wrong, and then we have to do more testing to figure out what it is. So he did a blood test, the levels were way off the charts. He said, we don't know what's wrong, but something's wrong. And then said we're going to have to do a full DNA test. They took 12 vials of blood out of a 2-year-old's arm, sent it to Massachusetts. So they did a full DNA test. It took from that time, which was in the end of September, all the way to about mid-December to get the results. And they said that what it basically showed was that he has muscular dystrophy.
When she was a baby, probably 4 or 5 months old, she wasn't meeting the milestones that most babies meet. She didn't sit, she didn't crawl, she didn't walk when all of the other kids her age were. When she was about 9 months old, they started getting concerned, but we had a very conservative pediatrician, so it's like, let's just wait a little while. And then in a couple of months, she was evaluated by a physical therapist, and at that point she was way far behind on her skills, so they sent us, our pediatrician sent us to a neurologist. That neurologist began a whole lot of testing, I don't know how many vials of blood she had drawn, MRIs, blood work galore, and through that process they discovered her muscle enzymes, her CK level and her lactic acid levels, those that are indicative of a muscle disease, were very elevated. And the neurologist here thought she had something called mitochondrial disease. So she sent us to Atlanta, Georgia, where there's a mitochondrial specialist. And so she went there and they did a muscle biopsy. And that muscle biopsy came back showing that she had Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
So at school, like on some days I have to go to a, what is it called again? Occupational therapist. Sometimes, and then there's a physical therapist at school that I have to go to every month. And we go to a physical therapist that is outside of school that we go to every other month.
What else do you deal with at school that's tough for you?
Sometimes it's hard for me to be able to keep up with people when we're playing certain games, and I don't like that.
So nobody in the family has muscular dystrophy, has ever had it. He was the first one. So it's passed down from the basically from the mother. If it's inherited, it's from the mother because of the way the chromosomes work. But anyway, so we said, well, it's either a gene mutation that happened in his development, when he was in the womb, or I'm a carrier and it happened on me and I gave it to him. Essentially, he inherited it from me. Or it could have even come up the line. But the further you go up the line, the fact that none of the, and it typically affects males, although it affects females, can affect females too with the same symptoms, but there were no, like I said, there was nobody in the line that had those kind of symptoms or that it even could have been. So in the end, I ended up having some heart conditions, and I remembered when my heart conditions came up, or when I didn't know I had them, but just a routine checkup, something didn't look right, so they said something's wrong. So it turns out I have a heart condition. Well, I remembered back when I was reading all about muscular dystrophy. The internet's a great thing. When you get diagnosed with something, you go look it up and you go, I want to know everything there is to know, right? And so you read everything you can get your hands on. And so I remembered this saying that about 7% of the carriers that are females have this heart condition. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's a little bit too much of a coincidence for me. And my cardiologist didn't even, she like, well, I don't know about that, she was like, but I knew I had read that. So in my head, as soon as I put those two puzzle pieces together, I said, I'm pretty sure I know what's going on here. So eventually they decided that that it would make sense for me to be genetically tested. So they said, so I went there, and it was at the clinic in Birmingham. I went there, they told me where at the UAB to go and all this. And so what they did was they ran a blood test. Instead of doing a complete DNA test, all they did was run the sequence with the problem and see if it matched his. They didn't do anything else but compare it with his. It was a perfect match. So they said, well, it's clear that I was a carrier, and that's why he got it.
They call it a spontaneous mutation. I'm muscular dystrophy anywhere in my family or my husband's family. And so we did go to genetics counseling through UAB, and we learned that things happen and they're just spontaneous mutations.
Only worry about what's happening today, and don't worry what's going to happen in the future.